Good afternoon, Leesa.
Good afternoon, Wendy.
It is awesome to have you on this afternoon. I cannot tell you how excited we are at the Secretariat to be putting together our first iteration of our Lady Leadership series and to welcome you to speak with us this afternoon.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to chat with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. As we conceptualize this leadership conversation, we really thought a lot about, what would this mean to our listeners and our members, having an opportunity to get deep down and comfortable with the persons who are actually leading the Secretariat. And of course, you in your role as not only a director on the board, but also as the chair of our advocacy committee.
Right.
So I'm really excited to take us through this intimate walk with Leesa. So let's dive in and see how we go through this journey this afternoon, okay?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, exciting. All right, so Leesa, let's start with, who is Leesa? Tell us a little bit about yourself, your personal journey, your career journey as well.
Okay, so Leesa, first and foremost, is a daughter of the Most High God. My identity is primarily in Christ, the fact that I was so lovingly and carefully made by such a wonderful and awesome creator. That is who I am. I am also Jamaican at heart. I am a perfectionist. I am someone who aspires to excellence, and I don't believe that there is any such thing as a boundary on who we can be or what we can achieve. Born and grew in Jamaica, brought up in a Catholic environment, really was, I would say, for the most part, nurtured by my beloved grandmother, who unfortunately has passed. But that interaction has been such an amazing and tremendous blessing on my life in so many ways. I'm also a very creative person. I started dancing at the age of 4. I had the great blessing and benefit of having studied dance, ballet at the Royal Academy of Dance right here in Kingston, did my exams year after year and was able to accomplish that right up to the most senior level that was offered in the country at the time, after which I joined the Movements Dance Company of Jamaica, one of the best dance companies in Jamaica, actually the second oldest dance company in Jamaica, and stayed with them and danced with them for over 30 years. That's how young I am, by the way. For over 30 years, and was a principal dancer right up until the time of my retirement from dance just a few years ago, when I was also the assistant artistic director of the company. So dance has been a major part of my life, and I share that just to really put a little bit more flesh on what it means when I say I'm a creative person. Also had a love of languages, went off and studied Spanish, and so I'm a little bit crazy about languages, and in my discourses with my team, every now and then I just break into Spanish, and some will write back and be like, okay, what language is that? Others will try a little thing, and sometimes I just go off into French, but I'm really only pretty much fluent in Spanish.
Lovely. Wow.
I also taught swimming for many years. And so I'm sharing that with you to see how much of people see me as a corporate leader, and they believe that your life is only defined by numbers, worse because I'm in banking,
Yes.
and beating the books and being hunkered down in meetings. But I have really pressed in to be balanced and to exercise the creative side of me. So I'm very well rounded in that regard, and have just benefited from that tremendously in terms of what I've been able to share with others as well. I'm a certified gatekeeper of the English language. I'm a certified teacher of English to foreign, yes, as a foreign language. So that's among some of my some of what makes Leesa who Leesa is. I'm also an exercise buff. I love physical fitness. I work out every day, 5 to 6 days a week. At one point, and this is how you'll know that I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. Like anything that I do, I challenge myself to see how far I can go with it. So I was also a certified spinning instructor at a point in time, because I started spinning and I loved it. And so of course I couldn't just be satisfied with going to a class and being taught, right? I had to just jump in and go on the other side as well. So yes, but yeah, now most of my workout is primarily at home, as you know, because of COVID.
Yes,
But
yes, of course.
interestingly, Interestingly, that has not been a challenge for me because my home had already long before COVID been outfitted with a treadmill, a spinner, and my yoga, um, my yoga appliances. So I continue to be able to benefit from the nourishment to my physical self through an exercise routine.
Fantastic. I mean, I'm blushing here, you know. I'm learning so much about you, and this is what we're only 3 minutes into this discussion, right? So, wow,
Right, right,
so there's a lot packed into a little package.
right,
Fantastic.
right, right,
Truly
right.
fantastic. Um,
In terms of my career, though, I should say, because you did ask me about that. So I did all my education in Jamaica. I was one of those who felt that the University of the West Indies could be as good as, if not better than, international universities. So
Wonderful.
after doing high school and my associate's degree here in Jamaica, I decided to go to the University of West Indies, where I got my first degree in accounts and management studies, and then also continued at the University of West Indies to do my master's degree in international business. So
Wow.
all of my education has been in Jamaica. Following that, an interesting story is that throughout my university life, I was adamant that I would never ever become a corporate executive. Corporate was just not for me. I just was not into the politics. I didn't want to be a 9 to 5. I loved teaching because, I shared, I taught swimming. I used to do
Right.
private tutoring for math students and, for finance students right throughout my journey. And I decided when I was finished my master's, I had to choose between doing a work study program and doing a thesis. And I said to myself, well, given that I'm never ever gonna really work in corporate, let me just do this work study program for
Of
six
course.
weeks.
Of course.
You know the rest, right? So we go off, we do this work study program, and then 6 weeks later, I'm offered a job, and I'm thinking,
Ooh,
okay, I'm not yet accepted in a university to do my PhD, so maybe I'll just do it for a while, and the rest is history. The rest
wow.
is history. We're
Fantastic.
now 20 odd years later, and I am
And
still in corporate.
boy, are you in corporate, deep into it too.
I would say,
You know,
yes,
it's,
I
it's
would
so
say.
very interesting though, as we move around and we speak to others, male or female, it's very common that you hear people go into banking with the intention of leaving in a year, right? And the
Absolutely.
they'll have with you 20 years later.
Absolutely.
It's still fresh and exciting.
Yep.
So there's still a lot happening in our industry and a lot to be proud of and celebrate. So tell
Agreed.
us then, what would you say are your guiding principles and your true success traits? I think you did say that you're a perfectionist.
Hmm.
Some people say that's a really, really good thing, and others think, sometimes it slows us down a little bit. Tell us how that.
Right, right. Yeah, well, being a perfectionist has its pros and cons, but I would say that one of the traits that I have that I believe has contributed so significantly to my success, I would say, is the art of discipline. Being disciplined, having the discipline to do what you know ought to be done, even when you don't feel like doing it.
Yes.
Having the discipline to do what is right, even when the world and everybody around you is pushing you in a different direction.
Mhm.
And having the courage to be different and to go against the grain, having the courage to stand out and not try to fit in. I think I think those two of my traits are traits that daily I just give thanks to God with much gratitude for that gift. And I must tell you that I believe that my discipline and the level to which I exercise discipline has to a great extent been crafted by what I shared earlier. My dance life, as a dancer, as a ballerina, as a swimmer, those activities require discipline and stick-to-itiveness. And I do think that that benefit that came from honing those skills growing up is something that has contributed to my success in life. The other thing I think is honesty is absolutely important. Wendy, one of the things that bothers me so much is the extent to which I think today it is so easy for people to be dishonest, even in things that don't even require it.
Yes, yes,
It's I do understand we're all human and we all have the temptation every now and then to just be like, maybe it's best we don't say this, or maybe it's best we don't reveal this. But I believe it has just become way too easy for people to be dishonest, and
yes,
and that is something that we have to be very deliberate about,
yes.
making sure that we maintain our honesty. And the final thing I would say in terms of a guiding principle, if I tell you that I'm going to do something, I do it. If I say that this is the direction we're going in. I honor my word. In so doing, of course, other things result where, people can rely on me and dependability and that kind of thing. But making sure that my word is my bond also ensures that I'm careful about what my word is, and so that I am careful to say that which I know can actually be delivered and is true.
Absolutely. And you know that, like, I've taken a bookload of notes so far. You see my hand going down every few minutes because there's so many little nuggets that are coming out as you speak. There's so many little pools of wisdom. But one of the things that really resonates for me here is being deliberate
Mm-hmm.
and being purposeful in the things that we do.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I think that kind of pulls in so much of what you said in terms of, we do things not necessarily putting any thought into it and what the outcomes are going to be and what the impact is going to be to those around us. So that's a really big one for me. And it seems to be a common thread as we go through these little dialogues that we've been having, that you hear this very often. And so I would say
Yes.
already we can begin to see that there's an emerging trend where
Mm-hmm.
success is concerned, that we have to be deliberate in the things that we do.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's something that applies to all of us, but I believe so more so for us lady leaders,
Absolutely.
because we exist in an environment that has, been traditionally institutionalized by a certain kind of thinking, a male dominance. And if you're not careful, you get drawn into being treated like, being spoken to in a manner that is not consistent with what should be. So you have to really be
Right.
deliberate about a lot of things, how you manage
Absolutely.
yourself and how you allow people to treat you.
To treat you and how you establish your brand. That is also so very important, your personal brand.
Correct, correct.
So you've actually taken me into my next trend of thought, which, gets a little bit heavier as we go.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about your experience in the industry
Mm-hmm.
as a female leader
Mm-hmm.
and what you see as the significant differences, if any, to your male counterparts. What has that experience been like?
Um, I would say that the differences are glaring. They're obvious differences. And I think that today we've made such great advancements that sometimes there's a temptation to kind of, be silent about the differences. But if we're to be completely honest about the situation, there are differences. To begin with, I'm sure you probably would have heard this one before. Remuneration for lady leaders there's still no equity or equality where that is concerned. I have in my journey stepped into positions that had previously in all its discourses been held by male leadership, and because of the level of that leadership had the opportunity of having sight of what remuneration packages would have been in the
Right.
past. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's that's just what it is. um, I believe as a female, one of the things that I've found is that there is the constant need to prove yourself even
Mm-hmm.
after you've done it.
Yes, yes.
You could prove yourself to be, excelling, to be worthy, to be equipped, talented, to have the passion and the right skills to do something. But having proved yourself, they're going to want you to prove it again and again and again and again. And so there is, thankfully, as women, I believe that we were created with a little bit more of a spirit of perseverance. So for us, persevering isn't a bad thing. And for me personally, that spirit of perfection and excellence that I spoke about, it's really not much for me to have to do it, but it is something that I observe that women are generally required to prove themselves over and over again. Whereas your male counterparts may not be required to prove themselves repeatedly. Once they've proven themselves, they are just given that
Yes.
trust, if they're even required to prove themselves to begin with. But the
Mm-hmm.
part that is more concerning, Wendy, is when what they have proven is that they cannot do the job and
Mm-hmm.
they're not equipped for the job, but
Right,
they're
right.
still given the opportunity.
Yes,
They're
yes.
still given the opportunity.
And I remember in my own career journey hearing about this old boys club. And
Oh,
every time I
yes.
heard it, I just wanted to,
Yep.
it drove me mad because you have these conversations where people say to you, my goodness, I could not have expected or anticipated this result. And yet when the opportunities come up, it's, how is this going to
Mhm.
compete with your family? Well, that's kind of a concern for me, not necessarily for you. It hasn't interfered in the past. So absolutely, I agree that there are still certain areas where we have a lot of work to do within the
Yes.
industry. Um,
Agree.
But I think as well, we have real success stories where we can see the synergies that are created between our male counterparts and ourselves, and how we're able to get over these hurdles. So I think there's been movement, but there's still tremendous opportunity for
Absolutely.
consistency.
Yeah, we've come a very far way. I mean, even in my own organization, when I joined my organization, I joined at a fairly senior level as a senior manager. And at that time, I would say I was probably about the third or fourth person in senior leadership in the entire group. And I mean, today, if you have a look at our annual report, you'll see a
Yes.
plethora of good, strong female talent. So we've
Mm.
really come a far way in terms of opening up the access to female leaders. And I must say that my group CEO, Mr. Earl Jarrett, he has been a champion for us women. And believe you me, he really has.
Yes.
He's one of those few men that a woman and 10 men in the room, she going to have the same access to voice and to be heard, and that's not the same in some instances. I have colleagues who have the opportunity. Yes, been given the opportunity to serve in a leadership role as a female, but once in there, the treatment,
Yes.
you see the
Yes.
difference in certain things. So as you said, in terms of access and availability of these jobs to women, we've come a far way, but we still do have a far way to go in terms of the mindset. And I think it's something that will happen over time, because in fairness to our men, they were also brought up in a
Yes.
male dominated
Yes.
kind of
Yes.
environment.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
It's how we were
Absolutely.
socialized.
Definitely, definitely. So we're hoping that we will see a stepping up in the movement, to support one another as we move through this journey, because it is quite a journey and the needs are changing significantly as we go. So, Lisa, so as a female leader, what are you most proud about? Like, I've heard so many things to be proud about, but what is the one thing that you can really tap into and say, yeah, this is who I am?
Yeah.
And conversely, what has been one of the most significant barriers for you as you move through your journey?
Okay. So in terms of what I'm most proud about, I would say um, I'm most proud about the accomplishments that I was able to achieve that everyone said was impossible.
Uh-huh.
Those accomplishments that when you sat in a boardroom with your colleagues and you thought through, and you were the only one who had the faith that something positive could come out of what you were proposing. And people look at you like you're crazy. It's just never gonna work. It's never gonna work. And you get the opportunity to prove them wrong. I would say those are amongst my greatest proud moments. And the reason
Yes.
for that, again, is tied back to what I said before: not being defined by the environment, but knowing who I am in Christ, knowing the gifts that He has given me, and using it, being a good steward of the opportunities I've had for education, the gifts and talents that I have, the ability to be so disciplined. Just this morning, I had a conversation with my mom, who unfortunately is not so well. And I had to say to her, Mom, your healing is going to rely heavily on your discipline, because
Yes.
you're not following doctor's orders, you know? And just that, I thought about it after, and I said to myself, Lisa, what is it? What is it other than the grace of God? And, the blessings that I had, as I said, to be able to dance, that it seems so much easier for me to be disciplined than a lot of people. And
Mhm.
so it's not something that I take for granted.
Right.
But
Right.
having said that, as you know, Wendy, you yourself are a well accomplished female leader. And so you know that when you operate in an environment, and if we're to be fair, our industry is one that has traditionally been even more male dominated than some others, right? Um, when you're in that environment with your male colleagues who hold the purse, the FCs who are generally men, and that kind of thing, and you want to push forward with a program, and nobody believes in you, really being able to stick out and find a way to sell it and get your approval to do what you need to do. And then the sweet part is when you actually prove them wrong.
Get it done.
Yeah, you get it done.
When you get it done.
When you
Yeah.
get it done. I remember back in 2007, it was the era when we had the financial banking was
Financial
being
crisis.
challenged by all of the alternate investment
Mhm.
schemes that were cropping up across the region. And then of course by 2008 you had the financial crisis. But I remember in 2007 in particular, a lot of the banks in Jamaica were suffering from a mass outflow of savings because people were just choosing to put their monies in these alternate investment schemes to get much higher interest rates than banks had ever paid. And a lot of banks strategized in a way that said, okay, this is just what it is, let us just, stay the course and trying to figure out how to reduce. And I remember saying to myself, why are we surrendering? I said, no, I'm going to grow NSI. I am going to grow the NSI for my organization. And when I'll just say that I grew it to a point where the board felt that the growth was too much and mandated that we back down. And so that was a major accomplishment for me because for me, there's a story behind it other than just what's on the surface. It's a story about, you don't be defined by the externals of things. There's more
Yes.
that can be accomplished. Shortly after that, I was transferred to another side of the organization, which was the remittance business in 2009. And again, the 2008 financial crisis, remittances were down in most markets. And having just gone into this job, I said to myself, I can't make a financial crisis not make me be able to prove that I was worth this job. And so I had to find a way and did it, pressed in to be different, pressed in to do things very differently than had ever been done, not only in my organization, but in the industry, and was able to grow our business in a time when, there was really not very little growth. So I would say those are the times that I'm most proud of. Alternately, you asked about, what are the barriers. I would say that for me personally, I indicated earlier that there's very, very few things that I consider a barrier to myself because I don't internalize things that stop you from achieving. I really do believe in the sovereignty and providence of God. But in terms of barriers, if I was to name one, I would say the things that have cropped up for me is primarily where people's jealousies, where people try to tear you down rather than to live up to the standard that you have set. Where when you accomplish things and when you are living your best self, people look on and become either, scared in their own skin, and where they try to tear you down. And one of the things I will say to you, Wendy, is that as we spoke a while ago about how much further we have to go as a people and as lady leaders, one of the things that concern me is that though we have so many more of us now in leadership, it is so sad to see that oftentimes the tearing down of lady leaders is not being done by the men. It's not being done by the men. It's ladies tearing down ladies.
And that is a phenomenon that I've never understood. And hopefully, I think there's a greater awareness. There certainly has become a more public talking point. You hear this coming up a lot. And you also hear the call, the plea to women, one another, that we begin to band together and grow together because there's
Absolutely.
a lot to learn.
Mhm.
It's unfortunate, but it is something that I think that there's an awareness of now.
Yeah,
What do you
yeah.
think? What do you think is the reason why this seems to be part of our? It's almost like it's part of our culture, and it
Mhm.
starts. It starts at the schools. It doesn't start in
Mhm.
the workplace. It actually starts when we're much younger than that. So as a Caribbean people, what?
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Well, as a Caribbean people, I know one of the things in our DNA is our spirit of competitiveness. Um, and I guess if you think about that and put it in the context of where we learn to be competitive is usually in sports, in schools.
Right, right.
And that typically in that kind of scenario in sports, when someone wins, it means that someone loses. So I don't know if it is that we have internalized that to win in the game of life means that someone has to lose.
Has to lose, right?
And so, but that's just not the life that we were created for.
Correct.
Sports is one thing, you know what I'm saying? And maybe that's why I was a dancer. Maybe that's why dancing was my passion, because when you're on the stage dancing, whether you are the star at the front or whether you're a backup dancer at the back, you are as important to what that final piece looks like. And so everybody has to do their utmost best.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that is what it is, but you're absolutely right. There are people who think that, in order for me to win and shine, somebody has to be,
Yes.
demolished.
Yeah. Well, certainly I'm hoping that with these sorts of initiatives where we get to celebrate women, ourselves, mirror images of the things that we go through, our life experiences, then we begin to break these thoughts and feelings down, where we feel that in order for one to succeed, the other must fail. That's
Yeah,
certainly the case. In order for us to
absolutely.
all succeed beyond what we possibly imagine ever possible, this is where we start recognizing and celebrating each other. So, Leesa, what advice would you offer to young women entering what is still very much a male dominant environment?
Yeah, I think we touched on it a bit, the importance of being deliberate.
Be
Being deliberate about knowing who you are, um, who created you, what you were created to be, so that you don't run the risk of going out into the world and being defined by your circumstances, being defined by people, being defined by your environment. I think that is a sure way to just, not ever be authentically you. So I think it's important to be deliberate about that. Um, I also think that having balance is important. Balance is important. You touched a bit on it earlier, and as you said, maybe there are really some very common themes that we, as as ladies and as leaders, we go through, and I'm sure that some of what we go through, some of our male counterparts experience as well. But the concept of work-life balance is one that you have to be deliberate about.
Yes.
You can't expect it to happen. The organization is not going to make it happen for you.
Right.
Circumstances won't make it happen for you. You have to take responsibility for your work-life balance. And oftentimes I hear people complain about, oh, I can't get a chance to do this because work. No, you can't get a chance to do this because you have not scheduled it. You got to
Excellent.
schedule it. You got
Now,
to
people,
schedule it.
this is the real Leesa. This is the person that I've come to work with over the last the last almost 2 years, right? It is what it is. It's our life choices. It's decisions
It
that are
really
going
is.
to either make us or break us.
Mhm.
Um, and at the end of the day, you can't really blame anyone for it. You have to own it, right?
You
Because
have to own it. You
this
have to
is your
own it.
time on planet Earth, right? So it's either going to be happy times or not so
Yep.
much our choices.
Yep. Yep.
You brought it up, Lisa, in terms of work-life balance, and it's something that we hear, and for some it seems to be an ever elusive idea that's out there floating around, but they can never really make it happen.
Right.
And I know that your job is extremely demanding. Your organization has done huge and fantastic things. Talk about innovation, guys. Read up on JN Bank if you haven't had a chance to do so. Um, how do you maintain a work-life balance, a healthy outlook on life, a healthy attitude, and then you're glowing, right? So how, how is
Well,
that possible?
and I will share with you, Wendy, that it's a joy for me to answer that question today because it's not something that I always knew. If I was to take you back a few years, I would be one of those women that I just said would be
Right.
complaining that this is what the organization is doing to me. And unfortunately, it almost cost me who I am, health-wise and otherwise. But for me, number one key, as I mentioned, you have to be deliberate about creating that balance, about making time in your schedule to have balance in your schedule, that
Right.
some of your hours are actually spent doing things other than work. Yeah. So being deliberate is number one. Number two, when we talk about work-life balance, people seem to think that work-life balance means work and no work. But we need to define what no work is.
Right.
We are made up of our spiritual self, we're made up of our physical self, we're made up of our relational self. There's so much more to us as individuals. And for some people, work-life balance means just going to work and having time to socialize and,
Right.
spending with family. Family is also very important in that. But I believe that the deliberate time that you need to make and spend on yourself includes setting aside time to work on your spirituality, your relationship with God. That's key. Setting aside time to work on your physical body, to do what is important. And that means also making sure that your body is properly nourished. So the time that you need for meal preparation to ensure that you prepare wholesome foods for yourself is as important as the time that you set aside to actually consume the meal. You know, family is important. We're made to be in community. And I think I recall in the briefing I got from Ray, she might have mentioned something about lessons with COVID. And I'm generally I generally am alone. I love alone time and, that kind of thing. But one of the things that COVID reminded me of is that even for a loner like me, community is important. Community is important. So making the time, being deliberate about being in a setting that allows you to relate and socialize and have the presence of and be present to whether it be family or friends, and and then the final thing, so it's being deliberate, it's making sure that you set time for all of the areas of, your emotional self, your mental self and everything. But guess what? You have to learn the power of no. You have to learn the power of no.
Lisa, talk to us about the power of no. It's something that most people that I've come into contact with struggle with a lot.
Yes,
In their
yes.
minds, they're letting the world down, and there's a fire somewhere, and I have the water, and I have the hose, and I'm the only one who can.
On planet Earth, who can out this fire?
Yes.
Yeah,
So talk to me about that,
yeah.
please.
I think I was able to learn the power of no when I shifted my perspective from looking at a no in that way, as if my no was a no to the world, but instead
Yes.
my no was a yes to me.
Right.
And
Right.
so if you think about when you're asked to do this, and this, and you realize that what you're to say yes to them means that you're saying no to you, again, it comes back to balance, because you're not going to say no all the time. You
Right.
know us, we're always going to want to give of ourselves and,
Right.
do the stuff. But you have to recognize the point at which it's important now to say yes to you as well. It can't always be no to you and yes to the
And
world.
yes to someone
And
else.
so when you kind of change the perspective and you realize that a no to something is not necessarily a no to outing the fire, but it's a yes to me to retool myself and re-empower myself, so that when I come to out that fire, it would be outed much more efficiently and effectively, and we'll never face that fire again.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I keep
Yeah.
saying, guys, a no doesn't necessarily mean a flat out no. A no,
Absolutely.
not right now, not in
Right.
this minute.
Correct, correct. In fact, I think I heard it once said, I don't remember which speaker said it, but um, she spoke about knowing how to say no, and you don't have to say no. You can say,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, but I am unable to right now.
Yes.
And it may be received a little bit differently when you say that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Fantastic. I think that's certainly one that a lot of people will benefit from. And as a career mom, I think I've kind of mastered the no, especially with my kids.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
let's
In
just.
fact, Wendy, you're touching on something that I mean, I'm very willing to talk about, because I think people sometimes also shy away from it. You speak about being a career mom, and there's the whole concept of me. I'm a single,
Right.
and there is also this concept with female leaders about whether the quality of a female leader is different, whether it be better or less.
Right.
Um, Depending on whether they're married or not or have children.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and
Yes.
I absolutely don't believe that our marital status defines who we are.
Absolutely.
I believe each marital status has a place in
Mhm.
our respective lives. I believe there are great benefits to be had from someone on a single journey, and great benefits to be had from someone who is in the ministry of marriage.
Mhm.
But you're right, because there is a thinking in corporate that if your lady leader is not married, you, the organization, have access to free reign. All the benefits of our singlehood is yours.
24/7.
And so
Yes.
they try to monopolize your time. And then we, on the flip side, as lady leaders, think, okay, well, I don't have a husband, I don't have
Right.
children, so there's no
Right.
reason for me to say no.
Right.
You
Right.
have you have to say yes to you,
Yes.
whether you're
Yeah.
married or single.
Yeah. Establishing boundaries is one of those critical elements, not only in your career, but I think in every aspect of your life, and
Everything. Absolutely.
even in my family life.
Mhm.
I've established boundaries. So the kids understand, especially my oldest son who's 14, he understands when mommy says no, or he hears a couple of no's in quick succession, that he his brothers quickly away. But it really is, we have to keep replenishing who we are,
Absolutely.
fountain that everyone
Absolutely.
is tapping into to ensure that there is enough to give. you know,
Absolutely. Wendy, that's the key. Being
yeah,
deliberate about retooling you and
being
replenishing
deliberate.
you.
Yeah,
That's the only way. I mean, this world will drain us of our
yeah,
energy, of our
yeah,
ideas, of our thoughts, of everything that's in our health. Um,
absolutely.
and this whole thing about stress, everybody's talking about it's a stressful world. I think
Yeah,
really it's how we respond to the world that causes us
yes,
stress.
yeah.
And the key is really to say yes to you. Say yes to you so that you can be the best you
Absolutely,
for the
and
world.
there's a new philosophy or new speak that happens in especially with the younger generation. Be unapologetically intent,
Yes.
not in a sense that you're unapologetic and you're rude about it,
Right.
but when you come to know who you are and
Mhm.
what it is that your needs are, in
Mhm.
order for you to be of value to anyone, you have to be in a position to be able to understand. I'm really exhausted. I'm really tired. I'm tapped out mentally.
Mhm.
Um, and as you speak about health and the draining life that we live now, let's talk a little bit about COVID.
Mhm.
Because I know that you had some very interesting experiences, Lisa. I mean, now I understand how you go through all of it, right? You exercise, you eat well, you make sure that there's meat. Put that down because I keep forgetting I need to schedule some time in for meal prep.
Yeah.
Um, what lessons has COVID taught you during this period, and what has it taught you more importantly about Lisa?
Well, as I said, I think I hinted on it. One of the things that COVID taught me is that even for loners like myself, community is important because we
Yes,
live in a world that is so high touch engagement, well, pre-COVID
yes,
anyway, that it was hard for me really I found I was constantly fighting for my alone time,
right.
fighting to disconnect, from the work, from the office, from even family. You just need some time to be still
Yes,
and silent. Um, Now with COVID, where that's available to you, you realize, okay, hold on. So I actually do need some interaction. All along, I
yes.
thought I didn't need
The
it.
silence is maddening, eh?
Yeah. So,
Yes.
but a friend of mine reached out to me last night and said, he was struggling a bit with trying to adjust to this new normal. No, he said this new weird normal.
Okay. Okay.
So
Yeah.
my response, my instinctive thought was new, yes, but weird. I'm not so sure that
Right.
it's weird. Somehow I
Right.
kind of feel like everything that's happening with COVID, I feel like we as a people, humanity, I feel like we're all just being drawn back to how we ought to have been. I just feel like we've become just too wired and too over
Too busy.
engaged and too
Yes.
busy.
Yeah.
And COVID is showing us that, guys, all this amount of activity really all it's doing is draining us.
Yeah.
What is it adding? Look at how
Yeah.
many. Now, Wendy, I will never ever underestimate because you and I both know we're monitoring it.
Right.
There is a significant economic impact of what has happened
Absolutely.
with
Yeah.
COVID. But I
Yeah.
have seen evidence in companies, in departments, in many very many many varied spheres of life where with reduced business and activity, a lot more is being
Done.
accomplished.
Yeah.
A lot more is being accomplished. And so you have to be like, hold on.
Yeah. What have we? What's happening? Yes. Yes. The paradigm shift is undeniable, and I kept thinking. I wake up on a morning. I actually sit down to have a cup of tea. I look at the sky. I called my brother one day. Like, this is really funny, right? I called my brother and said, "Man, it is beautiful out here. Like, COVID, the whole universe is at peace and the sky is perfect." And he says, "And you're not in your office behind four walls." And I sat and thought, well, yeah, actually, that's a good point. Maybe this is what it looks like on the
That's
outside time, right?
absolutely. You had
Yeah,
a moment to recognize what was always there waiting for us
what
to
was always
enjoy.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Some of
definitely.
us, I mean, as we interact, we speak to people and they tell you that they got so much accomplished during those periods.
Hmm.
When they worked from home, I had a meeting with one of our partners recently, and he had his son on
Hmm.
his arm,
Hmm.
walking around while doing this Zoom meeting. And I thought, like, isn't this just absolutely beautiful? And you know me, I'm a sucker for kids, right? So
Right?
it was just the most beautiful experience because,
Yeah,
we keep talking about the children being the next generation. But if we don't introduce them and we're constantly shushing them away because we're so busy, how do they begin to understand what it is that they're inheriting?
absolutely.
So for me, they've been truly, truly fantastic experiences. And at some point, I'm sure we'll reach out to our members to say, share with us what COVID did for you and how it really
Yeah,
pulled you
yeah.
back to what you want to
Yeah,
do.
I believe that would be a powerful piece because no
Yeah,
doubt we're gonna get some gems out of that.
I think so. I think so. So tell us now, we're going back a little bit. On a Saturday morning at 10 a.m., where are we going to find you and what are you going to be up to? Typical Saturday morning.
Typical Saturday morning, to be
Saturday
honest
morning,
with you, Wendy, you will
yeah.
find me in my war room, in my prayer closet.
Ah, okay, nice, nice.
Yes.
Okay,
So for many years, and my Saturday mornings are really special to me because remember I mentioned you that I taught swimming. I started
right.
teaching swimming at the age of 12, and I did it possibly until about the age of 30 something. So
Wow,
for many, many, many years of my life, my Saturdays were dedicated to getting up early, getting to the pool, teaching swimming for,
right.
extended hours. And when I finally, because of work, and the job that I was in, required a
Mhm.
lot of traveling and all of that, I decided it wasn't in the best interest of the children that I was teaching. So, I kind of
Right,
handed it
right.
over. But now I treasure one, not having to get up early on a Saturday morning
Mhm, mhm.
because you're going through school, university, you have to get up
Yes,
early
yes,
during the week. So Saturdays for me, as I mentioned, starting from age 12, Saturdays was always I get up early. And then
right,
again, I mentioned, I was brought up in the church, so Sundays you get up early. So
right.
7 days a week was a must
Yes,
get up early day for
yes,
me. And so
yeah.
as the years rolled by and it came to a point where I could actually have a free morning where you don't have to get up early, that was something that I treasured. But in
Mhm.
this season of my life where time in the presence of God and stillness and quietness is just so treasured, Saturday morning, you'll find me in my little prayer closet, sitting in my war room with a nice cup of coffee,
Mhm.
cool, no music, no
Mhm.
devices,
Yeah,
nothing.
yeah.
I love music, by the way. That's why no music is a thing because
Yeah.
music is constantly playing, right? We Caribbean people, we love our music, right?
There you go,
So
there you go.
just silence. And I
Yeah,
literally just listen to the silence and just,
nice, nice,
so
nice. Yeah, that
that's probably
sanctuary
my 10
space,
o'clock Saturday morning.
that sanctuary space is so important to recharge and reconnect and be prepared for what's to come in the week ahead, right?
Absolutely.
So I feel you,
Absolutely.
sister. I feel you. I feel like amen in there for me. I'm holding it in. I'm holding it in, but it's coming. Okay, so let's go back again to one of those heavier questions. So in your mind, and with your years of experience in banking, do you think that we've really made the progress that we talk about? Have we evolved as a financial services area, sector, industry? And more specifically, when it comes to female leadership?
Mhm. Um, I will say the answer is yes, and to varying degrees.
Right.
I think it would be foolhardy of me not to acknowledge the progress that has been made.
Mm-hmm.
Because they say that they say the hardest step in the journey is that first step, and we've
First step.
taken that first step. We've
Mm-hmm.
taken that first step. I think right across the region, we're seeing lady leaders in banks generally. I think I would have to search, and you would know better than me, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure that we can find a bank in the region that you don't have good female leadership.
Yeah.
Now we may have it at varying ratios and that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing, but
Mm-hmm.
I think we've made good progress. um I think that the industry overall, as it relates to leadership, I believe that there are signs of growth and evolution. However, I believe that we've been slow. And I don't know if that's because just, at human nature, we're kind of resistant to change. As you know, Wendy, right now, we're being forced to completely redefine ourselves as organizations, whether we're a bank or otherwise, as organizations. And many of the banks and many of the financial institutions across the region, when you look at what they're doing and when you talk to leaders and you ask them what they're doing differently, you realize that they were already on that journey to change.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying that it's not like many people have had to radically change their strategies because of COVID. And it begs the question, could we have started down this change path? Could we have been further along down this journey of transformation
Right.
without a pandemic having to push us in that direction?
Mhm.
And so I would say, yes, the evolution has started at varying degrees across various, well, countries to begin with, and then certainly the various institutions within their respective markets. But I do believe that we've been generally as an industry, I would say that we've been a little slow. And maybe there's a correlation between the pace at which we have moved and the level of lady leadership, because, we women, we are do it now kind of women. Um, the other thing to as Caribbean people, we have a little bit of a procrastination spirit in us, right?
Yes.
We're laid back and we will see that there is something that we're supposed to do and we know we're supposed to do it and we know we're going to do it, but we just wait a little bit longer.
We're a little slow. We're a
Yeah,
little slow.
we're a little slow, and so that may have contributed a bit to where we are. But I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful. I believe that nothing happens before its time,
Yes.
and as I said it before, and I mean I don't want to come across as if I'm being super holy or anything like that, but I really do believe in the sovereignty and providence of God, and so His timing. It may seem slow to you and I, but His timing is perfect, and everything is not about any one bank. It's about all of us as an industry. And so, yeah.
Absolutely. So you're in that vein, as bankers, we know that this is the perception that we are evolving, yes, but perhaps not at the pace that we would have liked to see.
Right.
What sort of encouragement or advice would you give to young lady leaders or young ladies with potential for growth and development within the sector, to stay the course and to keep doing what you're doing? What's your advice to them?
Yeah. Young people today, they display a little bit of I would say, a spirit that many of us don't, and that is their natural sense of curiosity. They're a little bit more curious than we have become accustomed to. And I would say to them, for young leaders, my number one thing, and again, I'm trying really hard not to be like, coming across as super holy, but I think our young people need to commit to knowing who their maker is and to living lives under God. Because the truth is, what can I tell them that Oprah hasn't told them? And, all of these books have been written about, what leadership is and all of that. But I think at the same time as they step out to embrace the world, people don't fail because they didn't do a lot of those things. They fail because they lost themselves. They broke under the pressure. They weren't able to have that work-life balance that we spoke about. They lose their sense of confidence and the sense of who they are. And before they know it, they're living a life that's not even the life that they wanted to live. And so being deliberate about who they are and about what the journey that they want to take, I believe, is really, really going to be crucial. And that's not easy to do, I would dare say. I mean, I often wonder, I pity people who don't have some form of spirituality, because I can't imagine the pressure that one faces without really having hope and faith. Like even in a time like this, as you know, the statistics tell us that since COVID, suicide rates have gone up, in a really unprecedented way. And I do, this is one of those times in history where all of us can identify with what anybody would be going through, because we're all going through the quarantine, we're all going through the economic pressures, we're all facing this together as a people, and yet some of us just don't have the resilience to stay the course. They don't have the hope and the faith that we can get over this. And so to me, it's again a call to us to just remember who we are. Who we are and whose we are.
And whose we are, from whence we came. That is very, very profound, Leesa. And I really hope that for those who will tune in at some point, that this, if nothing else, to be frank with you, if nothing else resonates, and if nothing else calls you back to listen to this particular podcast over and over and over again, that this will be the sticky point for most, if not everyone, because with all of the noise and with all of the pollution around us, there has to be something that's going to clear the air around you, something that you can continuously go back to and know that it's there. It's not
Absolutely.
going.
Absolutely.
And that's what it boils down to. So really, I appreciate that. When I can tell you that Rejan is sitting in the office, and if she's holding herself together, because I'm seeing the hand going up and the thumbs going up, and I can see her mouthing "Amen, sister." So I know that this is a powerful message for everyone, if not everyone who's going to be paying attention
Yeah, yeah.
to
And I think what's also one more thing, if you don't mind me adding real quick, Wendy, because I imagine we have a time constraint on this, but in terms of the young leaders, you and I spoke about how we're brought up to be competitive. Um, if we could just remember that there's enough success for all of us.
for all of us.
We who are in leadership, we need to be the shoulders on which the younger leaders will
Absolutely.
stand. And
Yes.
so we really need to build them up in such a way and pour into them in such a way that they're so full that when
Yeah.
they are faced with a situation where somebody's tearing them down, they can't but just pour out to that person
Or
as well.
yeah, yeah, and bring them along. Bring them along.
Lift each other up.
Yeah. When I was in core banking, in corporate world, I always said my mantra was "No man left behind." And then I said,
Absolutely.
kicking, screaming, shouting. You may be a little bit bruised when we're done, but you're coming over that finish line with me, right? Um,
That's it. I love that, Wendy.
Absolutely. We're all getting there together, right?
Yeah,
Let's forge ahead, ladies. We can do this.
we certainly
Lisa,
can.
we're getting to the end, and I'm a little disappointed. Bittersweet moment here because this is really what we're hoping that our leadership series is going to look like. Something that our ladies, even our gentlemen, can tap into to find something to refresh themselves and to remind them of why we consistently stay in this industry despite the fact that we're seeing significant, massive changes, challenges beyond what I certainly would have thought 20 years ago, a little bit more
Right.
when I started, but this is what it's all about, guys. How do you encourage or empower your team for success?
Mhm. Well, I think one of the things that I do very differently is to remind them of the importance of their spirituality, believe it or not. Again, I don't need to tell them about leadership styles and skills because they've all studied it. Um, Everywhere you go now, TED Talks, on YouTube, Oprah, you name it, there are books. There's a plethora of tips on, what the best female leaders do, what the
Right,
world's best
right.
CEOs do. There's all of that. Um, and even with all of that, look what's happening around us. There are many who are just not making it or cutting it. Um, I think one of the things that I try to do, though, is to make sure that people understand and try to point them to who they are and to encourage them to be authentic.
Yes.
Trying to live somebody else's life is just so frustrating. That's one
Mhm.
of the things that again, for the young people, you come into a male dominated industry, you're not there to be a man. You're not there to walk this road and lead the way the men led because you weren't created to do that. You are a woman. You have different traits, you have different styles, you have a different spirit in you that brings as much, if not more value to the equation. And so let us not ever feel that when we come into corporate we have to be like men, and I said it earlier, that is one of the successes for me, is pushing in to be different. I don't need to do the thing the way my male counterparts would have done it or did it in the past. I can do it differently, and there are different benefits, and I can enjoy it because I'm being me, I'm being authentic. So I try to encourage people to really be authentic. Take the time to figure out who they are, what they enjoy, what their skill sets are, and use them in the best way. Unfortunately, a lot of people find themselves living lives that's just not the life that they even want to live, but they believe society has told them that that's
Yes.
the best life, and so they press in to do this thing, and they put on a pretty smile while they're doing it, but inside,
Yes.
what's happening inside. So to motivate my team, I try to encourage a spirit of acceptance. We're all different. We have our strengths, we have our weaknesses, but we all are created by the same creator, by the way. And so we all have his divine handprints on us. And so we all have benefit and value. No one has to be left behind. And I'll be very careful to point out that when I say this, I'm not saying that only from a feministic standpoint, because I do happen to mentor a lot of young men as well. Um, and unfortunately, sometimes people go only with the extremes. If we want lady leaders, now lady leaders are coming in, and then we don't need to compete with our men. Our men also have great value that helps us to be our better selves. And so really finding a way to know when to turn up that competitive dial and what it
Yes.
should look like, is, I think, also very important.
And Leesa, you made such an interesting point about the behavior in the boardroom. And we see this happening so frequently that you walk into the boardroom and you can't differentiate apart from maybe the nails and the hair. And female, right? Because there's a natural, it almost seems like a natural tendency to behave and to speak in the same way that the men do because you want to be seen at the table. But guess what? You're at the table.
You're there. You're at the table.
You
Yeah,
know, so you got
absolutely.
something incredibly beautiful about being a female with power
Mm-hmm.
and being able to strike the balance because that's just the way that we're created, right?
Yep. Yep.
Um, Here's one question that I love. Who inspires you and why?
Well, I mentioned her earlier. My grandmother, I must say, has been a huge inspiration for me. Um, who my grandmother was and the life that she lived is really a testament to many of the principles that I spoke about earlier, particularly as it relates to the importance of standing out and not necessarily fitting in. I think society generally, we're brought up and socialized to feel that, who is the odd one out? Those games that we give the little kids,
Right?
10 of
Yep.
these monkeys, one is not the same. And
Yep.
we're always looking for the odd one out. And
Right.
somehow when we identify them, it's they're shafted
Outcast.
aside.
Right.
I
Outcast.
think daring to go against the grain of that, and really standing out is something that I learned from my grandmother, and I learned from it in a pretty biblical way. Um, in one of his letters, the Apostle St. Paul talks about the importance, and Jesus tells us himself that, be in this world, but not of the world.
Yes.
And that's what standing out means. If you're in this world and of this world, you're going to fit into the world. You're going to do everything just like the way the world does it. And if we're called to not be of this world, it means that I'm really not supposed to fit in with the world. My grandmother did things very differently. And I must tell you, growing up, I didn't understand it. I didn't understand it when I used to chat. I was like, why would my grandmother do this? Why would she stay in this situation? Why wouldn't she get mad? But she really pressed into to live a life under God. Her standard was God's standard, and that was the only standard that would hold for her, regardless of what anybody else said. And I was able to learn what that looks like tangibly. And so because of that blessing, she inspires me because it's not easy. But I can tell myself, look, you can do it. When I'm in that moment where it feels like going against the grain is really just not going to work out for me, I can remember that if my grandmother could have done this, I certainly can.
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
certainly can. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no discounting the influence of grandparents in the growth of children. And so, I always think back to the village raised as a child.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
and in the
Absolutely.
Caribbean context, we are so blessed because we generally do have those sorts of ties that perhaps our counterparts in the metropolitan countries don't. Certainly something to be grateful for. I know that I can actually come to work every day and focus because my mom lives with
Mhm.
me. So she's
Oh.
the wonderful raising my children. I'm blessed. Blessed. I claim it. I acknowledge it. So here's a question that's off script, but one that also means a lot to me because I think that gratitude is one of those things that I try to live.
Mhm.
I try to live in a
Mhm.
state of gratitude because there are so many things that are going to be thrown at us that it's really easy to become derailed.
Absolutely.
The punch in the gut, and it's coming. It has to happen. It's part of growth and it's part of defining who you are.
Mhm.
So ladies, look out for it. Don't run from it when it comes. Take your teeth into it, okay? Um, Within your career,
Mhm.
if you had the opportunity to look back and say thank you to someone who really shaped who you've become,
Mhm.
have you done it? And if you haven't, here's your platform.
Wow. Looking back, well, the truth is there are a number of persons that I think I would thank because I mean, I'm so grateful about all of the blessings, the opportunities that were there. And at the time it didn't seem that way, but
Right.
somehow God, has always lined up the right people at the right time.
Yeah.
Um, but in terms of if there's someone that I would want to say thank you to, oh, Wendy, there are many. It's just which one
I
I'm
know.
gonna choose, right?
Fantastic. But this truly shows that, it really is not when we think about our success. if we were to be honest about it and really dig deep, we recognize, and like you rightly said, at the time it may not have seemed because this person is really pushing me, and I'm thinking like, what's up with
Yeah.
you, you know? And then you can sit back and think, you know, it was for the best, even if it made me feel really uncomfortable or maybe even really small at the time. Look at what it's helped me become.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that there's someone that I'm thinking of now who I was fortunate enough to be able to say to her before her passing
Mm-hmm.
just what her influence was on my career. And this is when I was a teller in the bank. She and I had this conversation maybe 6 months before she passed.
Mm-hmm.
And then I heard of her passing, which floored me for a
I can
bit. But,
imagine.
you know, I think that to live in a state of gratitude and grace means that you're able to turn around and say to the person, particularly if it was
Yeah.
rocky,
Yeah.
yeah, thanks. Thank you so much for either believing me or pushing me because you believed in me. You know, that I take those moments. But I know that I've put you on the spot there, Leesa. So if you can't come up with a particular
No, there
name now,
there are many that
no,
that come to mind. My thought is a few things.
right,
One, generally I do try to say thank you as I go along the journey. Um,
right,
and the
right.
persons to whom I would say thank you are so many and varied. I kind of wondered, would you like me to thank a female leader, perhaps, since we're talking about ladies?
A female leader is great.
Well, what I
Absolutely,
would do is I
absolutely.
would take this opportunity to say thank you to a colleague of mine. Her name is Tasha Manley. Tasha is now
Mm,
the legal counsel for the JN Group, but Tasha and I went through almost, I would say, about a year of a very tumultuous experience together within the organization. And what I'd like to thank her for is um, throughout that time where we were pitched against each other by multiple stakeholders across the organization, above us, beside us, below us. At the end of it, and we fought, we had bitter fights. At the end of it, throughout that journey, one of the things that we both were able to do was to maintain our professionalism in getting the work done. And jointly, we accomplished great things for our organization. And
awesome,
so,
awesome. And that's what we spoke about earlier,
yes,
isn't it?
yes, yes.
Yeah,
And so a big
yeah.
thank you to Tasha.
Big shout out, Tasha. Big shout out from the Caribbean
That's
Association of
right.
Banks as well. Because that's what it's all about, right? It's recognizing our value to each other and knowing that it's not always going to be smooth sailing, um, as long as it's done in the right spirit, which is without
Mhm.
malice and in the interest of getting the job done. Leesa, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I think certainly if I'm to judge by the reaction in the room, our little interview today, this is going to be fantastic. I can tell you there's been dancing, there's been celebrating, there have been tears. Um, but this really is what we are working towards doing, getting you to know each other, to understand who is the person that I'm working with, who is this person on the call. So I really appreciate you allowing us to dig into your life that way. And I really look forward, more importantly, to launching the Lady Leadership series come October. So there's so much more to come. This is one of the initiatives that we're working tirelessly to bring to you, one of the innovations that I'm really excited about, and I'm thankful to the board for our support in getting this out to
Absolutely.
you. Leesa, thank you so much, and I look forward to
Thank you,
talking.
Wendy. Thank you so much for having me, for allowing me to share. But also, I have to say a big thank you to you as an awesome lady leader. You display such grace while you do what you do. And you know, you work with a board that can be tough sometimes, but you're doing a great job. And so, as I said, stand on my shoulders and I'll stand on yours whenever required.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We can do this. We got
We
this,
got
like I always
this.
say.
We got this,
We
girl.
got
We
this.
got this. So
Absolutely.
thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. We look forward to our next chat, and there will be many to come, folks. Please keep listening and keep looking out for the Caribbean Association of Banks and all that we're doing to support you.
All right, Wendy. Take care. Bye bye.
So, take care. Bye bye.